Let's talk about Ukraine. As part of Russia's offensive in Ukraine, they've blockaded the country's Black Sea ports, such as Odessa. That's squeezed Ukraine's exports, trapping an estimated 20 million tons of grain in the country, threatening to affect global food supplies. Russia has been accused by the president of the European Council of weaponizing Ukrainian grain exports in a cynical attempt to force the West to lift sanctions. Elena Neroba is a business development manager at Maxigrain, which manages agricultural trade around the world. Good morning to you.
Morning.
We've talked about this before on this program. This problem of the blockade on Ukrainian wheat getting to the rest of the world. How bad is the situation as you read it?
Since the February 24th, since the beginning of the second stage of war, about, as you mentioned already, about 20 millions of Ukrainian grains, including both corn and wheat, are blocked in Ukraine, which means that people all over the world can't supply grains and price increase. Basically, grain prices have been increased since the beginning of COVID quarantine, as supply chain were broken. But when government started printing money, inflation began to rise, and the war just supports this process.
Can we Can we draw a line there? I mean, is it serious that this what's happening in Ukraine, that the inability to get the grain out will directly lead to people to starve in other parts of the world? Is it as bad as that?
Yeah, using 1 kilo of wheat, you can bake bread, which is enough to consume to feed 4 people daily. Let's calculate. If we have 1 kilo, we can feed 4 people, and we are talking about 6.5 million tons of wheat, which are talking in this season. And in 2 months, Ukraine, as all countries in Northern Hemisphere, as Great Britain as well, will start harvesting new crop. And because of the war, area of the next crop decrease. Yields of the next crop, potential yields, already decrease because farmers can't do all the things they should do in fields. And some areas we are cut from part of Ukrainian areas as per war. Right. So for next year, this gap will be even higher because the war begins in the second part of marketing year, when Ukraine already have to supply almost 70% of what we have to supply. But for the next year, we will start from the very beginning of the season.
I understand. Yeah, it's going to get even worse. So, is it possible? Do you think it's likely that there will be some sort of international agreement to get the grain out of Ukraine? We talked about that before. Could there be a convoy that breaks the blockade? Will anything like that happen? Do you think?
Oh, the question of convoy is very interesting and very sensitive for both globe and Ukrainian people. Yeah, basically it's possible to convoy vessels from seaports to destination, to port of destination. But I have 2 questions. The first one, how to deliver safely the grains from silos, because they are all over the country and Ukraine is quite a big country, to the port, because daily silos, railway structure, port infrastructure are bombing. A few days ago, they destroyed one of the biggest Ukrainian grain terminal in Mykolaiv. So it's quite dangerous to load the vessels with the grain. And the second question is, everyone now are talking about Ukrainian grain. Which newspaper you open, it's about, the first headline is about Ukrainian grains. So everybody talking about Ukrainian grain, but nobody talk about the war and Ukrainian people. So could it be if grain will deliver it, and nobody care about what happened in Ukraine, so let the war going on?
That's interesting.
Yeah, but let's yeah
People
yeah
pay
but
attention to the
let's
grain, not the people. That's interesting. The other worry, I suppose, I heard a story that the Russians were smuggling some grain out and trying to sell that in the open market. So actually, Russia will end up benefiting from the raise in wheat prices because they'll get some grain out, and some countries will end up buying from Russia.
Yeah, it's true. They use occupied Crimea port since the beginning of occupation for the last 8 years. But before, nobody cared about it because traders really pay money for the grain to Crimea farmers. But now what's happened? They came to farmers in fresh occupied regions like Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and just took the grain for free of charge, load to the vessel and trade with countries who doesn't care about the origin, like Syria, for example.
Yeah, and that actually make me a greater profit. But it's fascinating. It seems an area we have to see some action soon, Elena. Thank you so much for explaining it all so clearly to us this morning. That's Elena Neroba, Business Development Manager at Maxigrain, and it's one of those issues I think that it's going to be a big problem as we go along. We talked about a lot on this program, and we're not quite sure what the solution is.